Our Audit and Risk Management Committee members on the line, our Chair Ron Lalonde, Joanne De Laurentiis, and Julie Osborne.
Okay, so Christiane, are we ready to go?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so then I'd like to call the meeting to order. I apologize for not being on video. I'm in the wilds of upper New York State where the internet is not reliable enough to do video. So, but the good news is you don't have to look at me. Okay, I will remind you, well, I guess first of all, we should do the land acknowledgement. Christiane, could you do that for me, please?
We acknowledge the land we are standing on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.
Okay, thank you, Christiane. So can I start by asking for a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting of September 24th? Joanne, could I ask you to move that?
Sorry, just unmuting. So moved. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Julie, will you second that?
Yes, if I'm allowed to, because I wasn't at the meeting.
I don't think we have a choice. Well, I suppose I could second it, but in any case, we can record it that I seconded it just in case, and we are all in favor. We have a relatively light agenda today. There's only the two items. KPMG is going to walk us through their audit plan, and Christine is going to walk us through her internal audit plan. I will, it's a bit awkward with me on the phone and other people, you know, connecting electronically. So, but I think we're a small enough group that I will go around and ask if there are any questions or comments on any item. I remind you that we are still a public meeting, so the line is open. It's on the TTC YouTube channel. So there will be members of the public participating in the meeting as well. And you have contact information if you have any technical problems, but if you're able to unmute, simply let us know if you're having any issues connecting to the meeting. So with that as introduction, I think I'll go directly to item 1 to have KPMG present their audit plan. And Kevin, are you there to start that?
Hi, this is Joanne from KPMG. I will be presenting on behalf of KPMG.
Okay, that's great, Joanne. Why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I guess first off, before we begin, on behalf of the firm, we wanted to say that, you know, as a firm, we're very excited for the opportunity to work with TTC to serve you as external auditors. And personally, I am also very excited to be part of the team. My name is Joanne Moy. I am an audit partner at KPMG, and I specialize with working in the public sector and the nonprofit sector. So absolutely thrilled to be here, and look forward to walking through our audit plan with you. And maybe before we dive in, I'll just introduce Regan Travers, who is our senior manager, also here at the meeting this morning, and he will be presenting the plan with me. Regan, over to you to introduce yourself.
Hello, so my name is Regan Travers. I'm a senior manager. I'll be the senior manager in charge of the audit for the TTC and TTC Insurance Company, and I look forward to working with you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so between Regan and I, we will walk you through our audit plan. So first off, we did put together a robust and detailed audit plan for you this year, and in particular, because it is our first year through, we wanted to make sure that the committee has a good sense of the audit procedures that we intend to do and some of the areas that we intend to spend more time on. So with that, we'll dive right into it. Starting on to page 1 of our document under executive summary, and that's where we will start. Okay, so COVID-19, the first item being COVID-19. So COVID-19 has certainly impacted the way that things have been going for the last 9-10 months, and also has changed the way that we conduct our audits. There are a number of social distancing requirements that require us to conduct audits remotely, as well as audit risks that have arisen as a result of this environment. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but do want to let the committee know that our plan does include procedures specifically tailored because of the COVID-19 environment. Second item under group reporting. So we are retained to complete the annual audit of the financial statements of TTC, as well as being the component auditor for the TTC with respect to the audit of the city's financial statements. So just wanted to let the committee know that we also have received group audit instructions as part of the city audit, so that we will also be communicating with our group auditor, with the City of Toronto team, for any significant findings. The next item under audit and business risk, we do want to let the committee know that our audit procedures, the way that we conduct our audits, are risk-based. So we do not spend the same amount of time on all of your financial statement captions, but focus on those that are significant. So then we spend more time performing more procedures in those areas and less on others, depending on the audit and business risks. And there's more detail about these later on the pages that Regan's going to talk through. We've also provided you with information relating to our materiality, and the detailed calculation is on page 10, and we'll talk through that as well. Included in the document, we have a lot of information about the way that we manage audit quality. Audit quality is top of mind for us. It is top of mind for auditors. It is. We also know that it is top of mind for audit committees. So we wanted to make sure that you have some information regarding to that we will talk through. Now, as your external auditors, as their first year through, one of the required procedures for us is to connect with to communicate with the previous auditors and to review their working paper files to ensure that we are comfortable in relying on their working papers for opening balances. And we have completed that exercise. Also, just a quick note to the committee that this year, in our opinion, there's a courtesy paragraph to effectively describe that last year's financial statements were audited, and the opinion was issued by another auditor. So that's just a standard practice. And included in the rest of the document, we've also provided you with some current developments with respect to the accounting standards for your information if you're interested. So moving on to the next two pages, under COVID-19, these are really different considerations that we have to think about this year as a result of the environment. So first and foremost, that we are required to consider the entity's going concern, and this is no different than any other audits any other year. But in particular, because operations of organizations can really have a big fluctuation from year to year, in particular during the COVID year. This is something that we pay special attention to this year. Among other things, there's a number of other items that we would be looking into, but just we wanted to give the committee a flavor of some of the things that we will be looking at a little bit differently in relation to COVID. I do also want to just quickly speak on our plan for the audit. So our plan for the audit this year is entirely remote with the social distancing requirements. We do have robust security protocols internally at KPMG to make sure that information is being shared in a secure manner. There are approved security sites and digital tools that we can use to conduct audit procedures. And we're working with management to make sure that we are transmitting the information securely. Okay. But with that, Regan, can you talk us through the next few pages?
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm going to start to discuss some of the audit risks. So right now I'm on page 4 at the bottom if you're following along. So the first risk that I'm going to discuss is the risk of material misstatement of fraud for fraudulent revenue recognition. So this is actually a prescribed fraud risk according to the accounting standards. So it's not a specific risk to the TTC, but actually a risk in all of the audits that we perform. The standards require that we perform specific procedures to specifically address this risk. So down below, we have some of the procedures outlined that we perform as a response to this risk. So we do perform journal entry review of revenue entries that match predetermined high-risk criteria that we've selected. And we also perform various cutoff procedures, which include the review of the completeness of deferred revenue balances. Moving on to the next risk on page 5, I'm going to briefly discuss the risk of material misstatement due to fraud resulting from management override of controls. So this is also a presumed risk for the Canadian auditing standards. Again, so this is not a specific risk to the TTC. It is required to be a presumed risk in all the audits that we perform. Now, this is a risk because management is in a unique position to determine estimates, exercise judgment, post journal entries. Therefore, the opportunity is there to commit fraud. We design and perform various procedures as a response to this risk. So now just one of the procedures that we perform here is the review of management estimates. So I just want to bring to your attention that there is a revised audit standard this year, CAS 540, that is applicable to estimates. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit later on. Now moving through pages 6 through 9, here we've outlined our areas of audit focus. So this is where we're going to spend most of our time during the audit. And we've listed a number of procedures for your informational purposes that we perform as we go through the audit. Now, I'm not going to go through each of the procedures that we perform, but I just have these, we've presented these here for you for informational purposes. So I'm going to move over to page 10, where we discuss materiality. So materiality for this year's audit for the TTC will be 52 million, and for the TTC insurance company, it's 2.6 million. So for the TTC, it's determined based on the benchmark of estimated total expenses for 2020 at 2%. So the way that's calculated, we use the 2.6 billion forecasted expenses for the TTC times a 2%, which takes us to the 52 million materiality mark. And there's a similar calculation for the TTC insurance company. So for the insurance company, we use total assets. So it's 2% of the total assets of 131 million, which gets us to the materiality figure of 2.6 million. And then there's just one more number I'd just like to bring to your attention on this page, which is the audit misstatement posting threshold. So what this is as we perform our audit, if we come across any differences greater than this threshold, we do communicate to management and request that they make these changes. So the threshold for the TTC is 2.6 million. For the TTC insurance company, it's 130,000. And then this is calculated based on 5% of the materiality. And any difference that we come across that's greater than this threshold will be reported to the Audit and Risk Management Committee when we present our findings after the audit. So I'm just going to pass it back to Joanne briefly to discuss some audit quality matters.
Thank you. So on the next few pages, we have audit quality, some details about how we manage audit quality at KPMG and what are some of the things that we focus on, we think about for every audit that we do. On page 13 specifically, under audit quality indicators, you would have seen that we added a few of the measurement or metrics for you to also consider when you think about audit quality. So from our perspective, how do we ensure audit quality? We make sure that we put people who are experienced, who know what they're doing on the engagement. So the team composition is absolutely key from our perspective. The hours, we also ensure that there's adequate amount of hours at the managers and partners level to make sure that the engagement has proper quality control. All the technology that we employ are approved KPMG technology. So it's gone through robust considerations from an auditor's lens to make sure that they are approved tools to be used and in a secure manner. We also have a very robust internal quality review process, further to just being required to be reviewed by the external regulators. Internally, we also have a very robust process where every partner effectively gets reviewed every couple of years. Their files are being reviewed in detail against a set of basic requirements and quality standards. And finally, the last item being use of specialists. This is where when we conduct audits where we require specialists to look at certain items like the employee future benefits or certain liabilities where we require actuaries. Internally, we do have those resources as well. And as part of the audit, we do have a number of experts from our perspective to be able to deliver the audit of TTC and TTCIC.
Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the next couple slides. So we're on page 14 now. So page 14 is the key deliverables and milestones. So basically this graphic depicts the key dates associated with our audit. As of now, we've completed our planning and interim work. The year-end final work is scheduled to run from March 15 through April 16 for the TTC. And then for the TTC insurance company, we'll be performing the work January 18 through February 5th. And then we'll be reporting the findings for the TTC in May or June, and then the TTCIC in February of 2021. Moving down to the next slide on page 15, it's the new audit standards. So there is a new audit standard applicable to this year's audit. CAS 540 has been revised. So this is the audit standard on accounting estimates. The revised standard requires a more granular approach to auditing estimates. So there's more comprehensive documentation requirements, and a more comprehensive examination is required around the underlying components that make up the estimates. So this could be any data that's used to build an estimate, any assumptions used in the determination, or any methodologies that have been used. If there's numerous methodologies that can be used to determine an estimate. So ultimately, the purpose of the revision is to address the opportunities for management to exercise bias in the determination of the estimate. So I'm just going to pass it back to Joanne to carry through the current developments.
Okay, thank you. On page 16, we've provided you, and the next several pages, we provided you with information with respect of some of the current developments of what is happening in the accounting standards world as it relates to the public sector. At KPMG, we do have a representation at the accounting standards table for public sector accounting standards. Bailey Church is a partner in our Ottawa office, and he participates in that and also puts together public sector minutes and summary documents as periodically as they are available. So I'll encourage you to and management to have a look at the first link as well. And the next few items are really just an update in terms of some of the progress on some of these particular topics as it relates to accounting standards. There are a couple of standards that are coming in soon. Because of COVID-19, all the accounting standards are implementation date have effectively been deferred by a year. The first one is asset retirement obligation. It is a big accounting standard that is coming in, and it will have huge impact to the sector in general. And many organizations have started to think about and started acting on the initial phases of planning to identify what may constitute what they may have as a retirement obligation. So then they will be ready to include those in their books in a couple of years. That's the most imminent one. The rest of them are coming in the pipeline, but they may not necessarily be finalized. So they're still in the works. We just wanted to provide you with that information. So there's information on new accounting standards on revenue, on employee future benefits, public-private partnerships, which is a very hot topic in the public sector world. And finally, there's an accounting standards that are coming up, and amongst other standards here. The one thing I also want to highlight in our planning report, if I can take to committee to page 21 of the document under required communications. So this slide provides you with a snapshot of what we are required to communicate with you and management through this process. One of the things that we're required to do as external auditors is to hold annual inquiries with management and also with you when we have the opportunity to speak with you to get an understanding of whether or not there's any alleged or suspected fraud. So we have asked this question of management as well, but with the meeting this morning, I would just pause there and turn it over to the committee members to see if there's anything that we should be aware of.
Thanks, Joanne. I'm not aware of any potential fraud in the organization. Joanne or Julie, could you also affirm that?
I can affirm the same, not aware of any fraud.
Sorry, looking for unmute. Me too.
Great. Fantastic.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, there's a lot more appendices in the document. Again, those are more additional information for you. So I wasn't going to talk through all of them in great detail, but at this point, we're happy to take any questions that any committee members have over our report.
Okay, why don't I start with you, Julie? Do you have any questions you'd like to ask? Sorry, I'm not sure if I was heard. Julie, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, Joanne?
Yes, I had a couple of questions. Let me just pull up my note here, sorry. So on the, and I'm not sure if this is a question more to the management team, on the asset retirement point, would that impact, I know it's the way that management presents data, but I'm wondering if it also impacts how we then assess whether our assets, and I'm thinking of buses and streetcars and so on, whether then they maybe have to retire earlier than later, or is it just too soon to make that assessment?
Yeah, I can answer that question. I would say that it wouldn't. I don't think this would necessarily that makes an impact on when we may choose to, or when we think it would be necessary to retire an asset. It's about recognizing that when asset retirement occurs, there are certain obligations associated with that, and the idea is to get those obligations, those legal or contractual obligations, effectively recognized on the financial statements on a present value basis at the time of asset acquisition.
Okay, that's what I suspected. I just wondered. Another question is, through the note, it talks about that now you can review, through use of technology, you can review 100% of selected data, which gives you as auditors a much broader view of the operations and should give us greater comfort. I just wondered if you could elaborate on that a bit. Does that mean you will expand your review because technology makes it a little easier to look at information? So just give us, if you could just give a little more flavor around that.
For sure. So first off, yes, because of the technology that is now available to us with the way that we conduct audit, if our clients do have the information digitally in spreadsheets and databases, if we're able to extract those, we certainly are able to do more analytics around it instead of selecting a sample of transactions and review documents. This is the trend from an audit world perspective, and this is where we're heading. with the increased ability to get all of the data from management and also then be able to use that data and run different types of analyses. So then we will be spending time to look at exception reports, things that are outside of our expectations, and in order to help with, from our perspective, is better audit quality, because we are not just looking at it on a sample basis, we're looking at the entire population and to be able to comment on it. So that's the trend. Now, specifically for the audit of the TTC, I mean, the first one that comes to mind is the fact that we will be able to, download all of your journal entries, 100% of the journal entries that are being booked with the TTC, and actually use our tool, our proprietary tool, to run through the data and to identify through a set of high-risk criteria to identify entries that we consider are typically high risk, and to test 100% of those entries. So that's just one example of the things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And Chris, I guess this is a question for you. So that's it'll give you sort of a more interesting conversation to have with the different departments, the educational side of this. Is that something you're thinking about, or when the results come in, that's when the conversations happen with the team?
Sorry, Joanne, I'm assuming when you said Chris, you meant me, because I don't think there's any other Chris's on the line.
Sorry, I met you, Chris. Yeah.
Good. Just wanted to double check. No, absolutely. And I think, quite honestly, the world of financial attest auditing is not one that I focus on, but having been asked some recent questions, it kind of gave me an opportunity to review, and certainly that new standard that's coming, the asset retirement one, is rather interesting, because I think that's going to be a key area of estimation, and therefore, using the data and leveraging the data is something that our group has been trying to push, especially for the last few years, and I'll be speaking to that when I have the opportunity. But yes, definitely, the more data and the more sources of analysis that we can get our hands on, the better, and we will certainly leverage it and make sure that management understands why that's so critical and how it can be used.
Yeah, great. And then I just had a couple of other points, Ron, and I'm not sure these may be ones that we as a committee would want to talk about. But for example, the knowledge lever. When we look at when the auditors look at it at public-private partnership, which are going to be, they're more expanded now within the TTC, the kind of conversation that can lead to within the management team, what does that look like? Does it increase their ability to just do a better job around that? And then on the pension benefit side, just the analytics around the longer term implications and obligations, understanding those and the extent to which the management team would use that information during union negotiations. I'm thinking those two questions would be ones that we would ask more of the management. The management team, how do these new standards, how does this greater depth of information give management better tools, and how are they going to use those tools?
It's a good question, and particularly in a world of SAP, where we should be able to harness more of that data as well.
Yeah, so it may be a question we come back to when we get the audit report in June. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. I had a couple of quick ones as well for you, Joanne, from KPMG. The first is, I'm wondering, in a world of COVID where most management people are working remotely, when you're investigating fraud and control breakdowns, are there any new procedures that you need to use because people are working remotely? Does that introduce any new risks that you need to test around?
Yeah. For sure that we do have to think about certain things differently because of the COVID environment. Inevitably, because there are certain controls that may be running different now. The fact that people are no longer necessarily at the office and they have to operate the controls from home. It really depends. Our procedure is that we have to obtain an understanding of what's changed from what it previously was. Many organizations may already have the financial controls embedded into their system, so then the approvals and all that are already included in the systems, in which case we would still be able to view those. So I mentioned earlier about we have to make sure that we use secure tools to review those. For example, screen sharing is one of the opportunities that we can use to view certain things through with management, and those screen sharing tools are also those that are approved to make sure that whatever we're seeing on the other side of the screens are not being impacted and altered in any manner. So that's just an example. So to answer your question, for sure, we have to look at things differently. But the first thing that we need to do is to make sure that we understand holistically from a financial controls perspective what has changed from the previous environment, and then along with our testing to make sure that it does corroborate to what management says.
Okay, thank you. And one other question, you mentioned that you've done the handoff with the previous auditors. I just wanted to inquire, was there anything that came up during that handoff that you would like to make the committee aware of in terms of issues that they raised that may not have been communicated to us?
No, at this point, there's nothing to communicate, nothing to raise to the committee. We've reviewed their working paper files for the audit opinion that they issued last June. We received full cooperation from your previous auditors to review their documents offsite through screen sharing, and there's nothing that jumped out.
Okay, thank you very much. So if there's no other questions, I think, Chris-Anne, our responsibility on this item is to forward it to the full board for approval, and we will be recommending that. Is that correct? I don't have my notes in front of me.
Hi, Chair. No, this report is just recommended for receipt.
Okay, so it doesn't need to go to the full board. Okay,
correct.
So Joanne, can I ask you to move receipt of this report?
So moved.
Okay, and Julie, will you second it?
Seconded.
Okay, we'll consider that approved, and this has been received. Joanne and Kevin, thank you very much for your time this morning. We look forward to your results later next year.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so let's move on to item 2. Chris is going to present the internal audit plan for next year. Chris, why don't I turn it over to you to do that?
Thank you, Ron. And I'll just ask Andrew to pull up a presentation. I sort of prepared this in recognizing that we have a new member, Julie, so welcome. And I just wanted to sort of walk through a brief history of our department, because we've certainly gone through a lot of major changes over the last 5 years in particular, and it sort of sets the stage for the type of work plan that I'm putting forward. So if I could just ask Andrew to go to the next slide. Essentially, I just want to highlight here that, the choice of word evolution could have just as easily been journey, because I feel that's what I've been on for the last 5 years, although I'll be with the TTC 23 years come this January. And what I wanted to emphasize is that 5 years and prior, we were but we were only an internal audit shop. And like most audit shops, we focused on sort of preparing a 5-year cyclical plan that we covered off, each department, or certainly sections within a department, every 5 years. And so this was a traditional internal audit shop model, where our reports were your typically, long reports. It focused on highlighting where management fell short in their performance. We use language that quite fairly management could probably say, describe things as being more critical than helpful. We provided, in great detail examples to support our audit observations, but we often gave broad recommendations that didn't necessarily offer a lot of, options or solutions for how to address them. And unfortunately, this often resulted in management sort of agreeing with the report and just giving focus to correcting the examples that we gave rather than addressing the root problems. And finally, I can say this because I have been in the department for these 23 years, is that I really think it made our department something that management endured rather than welcomed or asked to come in and proactively assist them. So fortunately, 5 years ago, our previous CEO at the time, Andy Byford, had a theme about modernizing the TTC. And the opportunity was presented to me personally, as well as my team, to do just that for our department. And so I wholeheartedly embraced it and have been trying to modernize and push new ideas through our department in whatever way I can. And we started by making sure that when we did our work, we really did try to identify and give attention to analyzing the root causes of problems. We've been trying to leverage data wherever possible. We tried to write shorter reports that offered solutions. And more recently, we've been giving verbal presentations to management, in particular our chief, so that we can engage them right on the spot and have really encouraged more of a meeting of the mind with our work. And as we did at the last AMC, we've really have encouraged management to come and speak on their experience, not just from the audit, but more importantly about what they're going to do about the observations that we found. And I hope that's been more engaging for everybody, because really, most of the time management already knows what their issues are, and they even have ideas on how to address it. But sometimes what our group can do is we can just give more attention to it, and we have sometimes the more luxury of time than the actual responsible chiefs to deep dive into the issues. So really a conscientious effort has been made over the last 5 years to also diversify our skills, to remain flexible and responsive to management, and most importantly, to recognize that our success is really a function of our ability to build a relationship with management, as well as to get their buy-in on actions to take. However, I never lose sight that our primary responsibility is to ensure that key issues and concerns that are designed to protect the TTC and are worthy of the AMC's attention do get transparently communicated. So it's a fine line between being a support and I dare say a friend, but at the same time, one that really has to caution management at times to make sure that we stay on the path that I'm mandated to make sure it gets done and communicated fairly and honestly to our AMC. So if I could just turn to the next slide. And given that sort of, little opening speech, I just wanted to highlight some of the key initiatives that we've completed over the last 5 years with this approach and as part of our evolution, starting with, a use of video surveillance. This was a large undertaking, and it was the first attempt to bring together in one document a commentary on a topic for which there's many players and stakeholders. And in my opinion, our observations and recommendations prompted management to commit to developing a comprehensive camera strategy. And so this was really trying to introduce the idea that strategy and that kind of thought process needed to be more entrenched in our day-to-day activities. The next two audits that we worked on, subway track tunnel work and surface collisions. To me, these were audits that pushed the boundaries on the gamut of risks that we reviewed. The traditional focus of audit tends to be the financial, but I really feel that it was opportune for us to push and look at other things. And these two audits sort of emphasize the need to review safety and other processes that support it. And in so doing, I feel that our observations supported management at the time to make decisions in the making. So we were able to enhance the need for nighttime safety assurance programs, and we were able since then to provide what I call behind the scenes work in terms of supporting the analytic insights on bus collisions, which led more recently to the revamping of the rules compliance program and operator training. And then the next two were really, transit fare inspection, enforcement, and the customer tapping behavior. It became a great focus of our area in 2018 to really understand better our enforcement model. And then following the AG's fare evasion study, which she did, we were able to build on our own work as well as hers to design tests that I think gave greater insight into our customers' tapping behavior, and this informed our evasion study, which was statistically sound. And we didn't just focus on a number, but rather we raised issues that in my opinion, really led to a great board meeting that dived deeper into the social challenges of the fare evasion topic and on court costs. And I'd like to think that our work, again, a lot of the time we do more discussions behind the scene, but by bringing it to the RMC and in that case to the board, it really facilitated some great discussion. So all in all, I think our work and our styles was starting to trigger different types and levels of discussion that give greater focus for the need for strategic responses and integrated solutions that leverage data analytics. So I can just turn to the next slide. So quite simply, as an audit risk and compliance group, we've been able to define a little bit more broadly what our vision and mandate is. And a conscientious decision was made by myself in 2018 that I really wanted to diversify our skills to the extent possible. So by mid-2018, we welcomed our first non-accountant, Nadia, who had a legal background, and we were able to start on an initiative that we basically presented at the last ARMC on this executive compliance certificate legislation. So that was a great start to that. We also recruited new staff out from outside the TTC that brought a broader consultant background and advisory focus. So that again, it enhanced our ability to provide what's always been available through an audit working group is advisory services, but this person came with a different flavor for delivering that. We also leveraged the TTC graduate internship program, which I'm sure has a new name now, but we were able to attract and retain a young man with solid analytic abilities and comfort with those related tools. So again, that was a beginning of being able to do a different type of work. And then in early 2019, with Rick's support, we absorbed the risk advisory staff that had previously been working within the safety department. And so that brought to our team, engineers with safety and project experience and a mathematician. And all of these individuals brought with them new perspectives and viewpoints and strengths that culminated in the establishment of our audit risk and compliance department. And quite honestly, our acronym, the ARC, really kind of says it all. And this was an intentional acronym because in my mind, the visual it produces is that like an ARC, we're here to protect the TTC, but in reverse, we're also here to support management. Next slide, please. So as the ARC, with our new acronym in, our combined team of auditors and advisors and compliance experts, we've articulated our objectives to reflect a more integrated view of what we are trying to achieve. And collectively, we are to fulfill a unique role within the organization in a manner that allows us to draw attention to key issues in a variety of ways, but always keeping the best interests of the TTC at the forefront. But our role is never to tell management what to do, because as I said, the honest truth is that management usually already knows their pain points and they have already got great ideas on what to do about it. But what we can do, often with the luxury of more time, is we can help them peel back the onion layers. We can conduct deeper dives on the issues and data analytics. We gather factual evidence, and we can compare and contrast different opinions regarding possible solutions. And so some of the biggest shifts that we've done in messaging to management is to take advantage of us and allow us to help you in whatever way we can. And that's a message that really is what I'm going to sort of reiterate on the next slide. So next slide, please. So what I tried to depict here is really a continuum of our services. I mean, it's expected. I mean, we were an internal audit ship only for decades, and people still refer to as, oh, the audit group. And I wear that proudly, but at the same time, the message I'm trying to convey, especially over the last few years, is that audit does not need to be just after the fact. Obviously, the right-hand side column, that is the bread and butter of an audit shop. It is after the fact, but it does drive accountability. But if you go to the far left side for the risk advisory type work, which is where I think we've really been able to enhance what we do, especially bringing over the risk advisory group, it's about being preemptive. It's about giving advice that offers the opportunity to address things before they get to be a mushroom issue. So you get early remediation. And what I've kind of coined as a phrase of planting the seeds. Sometimes it's just being invited to a meeting. And I simply started off the conversation. Well, if this were to be audited, here's the issues that would probably be identified. But then we can have an honest conversation and address it before it becomes an audit. And I think that gives management, I hope, a more comfort level to know that, all right, you're not running to the boss, you're not running to the public board to expose these things. You're actually trying to give me an opportunity to fix it. And in that same manner, in the middle, our insight, that's where we've been trying to do more solution-based reporting. We've had staff who've been able to leverage data and do analytics that give greater insight on topics. And that's not to say that we don't have people doing this throughout the organization, but again, we have the opportunity to bring that visibility to a higher level. And I still push that our group can work on these types of dashboard developments that are being done now, not because we are duplicating their work, but because we want to make sure that they benefit from our experience and our exposure to the entire organization. So while some dashboard may be getting developed in one area, we can give the insights as to how it might be applicable to others and build it proactively rather than waiting until you're done and then coming back and asking questions about how did you validate the data? How did you consider this? Did you do that? So all of this repertoire of activities combined with a team with diverse skills, I think can help set management up for success rather than focusing on what a typical audit department did, and which we admittedly did, 5 years prior of bringing you down. We'd rather build you up and help make us a more resilient organization. So next slide, please. So to be quite honest, I'm being bold with my priority and my goal for 2021. And I dare say I'm putting out the word to be a trusted advisor. And admittedly, we are not going to be the type of consultant that just tells you what you want to hear. We're going to tell you what we think you need to know. And like any good advisor, we may challenge you in your assumptions at times. We may push management out of its comfort zone. We're going to ensure that you've considered opposing arguments and options. And we may very well wave red flags that make management double check their thoughts, which I full honestly accept can be annoying at times. However, I think it's how we can add value to make sure when management brings forward decisions to the board, they are fully informed, they're able to rationalize their position, and they're able to be prepared for any questions that are going to be thrown at them. And in so doing, we hope that we are fulfilling our role to protect the TTC, as well as help fulfill the RMC's role, which is to oversee the stewardship and management function. So if there's only one message that comes across in this presentation for Rick and for his all levels of management, is that if you proactively keep ARC informed and involved in your problem solving and innovative initiatives earlier rather than later, then we will do everything in our power to help you drive positive change and achieve the desired outcomes, even if it's just a conversation where we leave food for thought. And by being open and transparent with the ARC department, we can help protect the TTC and responsible management by ensuring due diligence is evident and exercised in everything we do. So next slide, please. So this, quite honestly, is where I now really am trying to set the bar and change the way we've even presented our work plan. And in 2021, I'm trying to build on last year's commitment and even earlier to remain flexible and responsive to the changes in TTC's risk landscape, as well as be able to pivot and change in response to CEO requests and management requests, which I'm grateful are starting to come to our door. So that in and of itself is a great part of our evolution. And in so doing, I'm trying to promote integrated risk management and enhancing resiliency with what we do and aligning our activities to the strategic and corporate goals. And quite honestly, when people talk about risks, there isn't enough conversation about what are the objectives that we're trying to achieve and address along the way. So the 4 risks that I highlighted in our work plan, quite honestly, fall from what is our corporate plan and what are we trying to achieve. And health and safety to our customers and employees has always been a cornerstone of the TTC corporate plan. And it's through our health and safety measures that will build back public confidence and protect our employees. So it was an obvious area of risk that I think ARC needs to give attention to and help support. Financial risks, obviously, as the KPMG highlighted, our financial impact of COVID is unprecedented, and we've done cost-cutting measures immediately, and they will continue. But at the same time, we have to be equally cautious that we haven't cut too deep and that we're still making investments that will drive efficiencies and innovation going forward. So I want to make sure that ARC can contribute to those conversations and bring that kind of balanced perspective. Service disruption. Again, pandemic has posed many challenges to delivering safe service. So we've implemented new delivery models. And the pandemic, of course, has highlighted the need to be prepared for low probability but high impact events. And it has really accelerated the attention that's being given to the whole topic of redundancy and resiliency, which quite honestly is opposite to discussions about efficiencies. So you really have to think through the mitigation strategies and where, again, do we want to make the investments in that balance. And finally, strategic risks. The pandemic has far-reaching impact on the TTC and the transit industry in general. And while obviously it's introduced risks, it's obviously also produced opportunities to leverage technology and to really drive home the need and use for data and developing data-driven strategies. And that's an area that, again, given the skills that we've collected in our group, we really want to support. And honestly, I learned yesterday that one of the strong data analytic people that I had on my team is being invited and welcome to join an operations team. And as much as it's personally, hard to see him go, I see it as being like a disciple now. We're finally starting to have staff that are able to deliver work in a manner that the operations, the key, recipients of our work are recognizing. And by having people now move into key positions, hopefully the relationship that they've had with ARC will sustain, and will be able to drive more change, not just directly, but indirectly. So there's all sorts of risks that we could have selected, but these were the 4 that I rationalized as being priority. In a lot of ways, they're common sense, but there's certainly lots of other industry benchmarking exercises that we can go through, but these were the 4 that I focused on. So next slide, please. And although my plan didn't identify specific assignments or projects that I put forward, it doesn't mean that I'm not starting the year off with ideas and where to start. And so I'm just sharing some of the more important ones. And obviously, the whole COVID response and recovery activities, a lot of new processes or revised processes were put in place in response to COVID, and they're still evolving. So I don't think it would really be fair to subject them to a quote unquote full audit, but it's definitely time to take a step back, do what I call a bit of a sanity check, ensure that lessons learned to date are being reflected and built upon and incorporated into going forward programs to make sure that they're sustainable. I've highlighted, payment, procurement, and payroll risks. Again, the financial implications of the pandemic. It did prompt many staff in these areas in particular to have to work from home. And TTC historically still had many manual processes that had to be quickly retrofitted to the extent possible in order to accommodate this new working environment. And reliance on technology and the ability for people to use technology as well as using it at home has introduced different risks. So we want to give some attention to that. And after listening to the KPMG presentation, there's an opportunity to leverage what they learned as well, because it's just as important to them, at least in the financial statement context. And finally, number 3, this is the one that's probably the most exciting and is a specific request from, Rick, our CEO, because of its a particular interest to keep driving this idea of using data and leveraging it. And I've coined it more as a digital transformation. This is what TTC is on the verge of doing, and we need to support that. And we will probably have to do this, but working collaboratively with other areas, operations in particular, to support the design of meaningful metrics and business decision-making tools. And in particular, we've got SAP and we've got Vision, and there's lots of data to be mined, and we want to help support that initiative. And then the last 2 items are what I sort of have identified as initiatives that we've started and that we'll continue to support, because they do bring visibility and drive accountability. And the first one, the Executive Compliance Certificate and Compliance Mapping, is building on what we presented at the last ARMC, as I said, with Nadia, and we're continuing to partner with legal to deliver executive presentations and to understand the pain points of management. And we want to ensure and support the functions that are designed and in place to support frontline management are doing everything that they can. So we don't want to necessarily just jump down to the first line. We want to leverage what the second lines are doing. And then finally, the follow-up and action tracking, another CEO area of interest, is that we will continue to monitor and ensure that management's completing action plans that address past issues for which they've committed to doing. And this includes action items that address both our past work as well as the City Auditor General's observations. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I certainly appreciate the patience. I hope for you, Julie, it gives a bit of a snapshot of what we've gone through over the 5 years. I think if there's topics to be had going forward, especially with these 3 members that we now have on the RMC, it will be around more risk management. But in my way and with the parameters that I've been given to date, this is what I am trying to outwardly put on the table. So I welcome any questions or comments at this point.
Okay, let's go to questions. Why don't we start with you, Julie? Any questions for Christine?
Yes, I do. Whoops, I'm off mute. Yes, first of all, thanks for that presentation, since I was really the driver behind your even doing it in the first place. It was most appreciated. Also, the fact that you took some time out, because I had a little background call with Christine last week when I believe she was supposed to be on holiday, helping get me situated. So on both accounts, I thank you. I wanted to ask you specifically about the fare evasion references in this report that you just presented to us, because as we all know, we look at in fare evasion, which is an issue that just continues to dog the organization on many levels. We face both a reputational risk as well as a financial risk. And I'm just interested in the scope of the work that you did, so we're looking at, first of all, defining the magnitude of the problem, which we got some assistance from with the Auditor General, and how far the work of your department goes in addressing the now identified problem. What kind of work did you do and do you foresee doing to see about ways that we can address this?
For sure. So definitely the work that we did prior to the AG helped inform our group better on what the enforcement model was at the time. And then the AG decided to do her fare evasion study before the full Presto implementation, which was fine. So they went through their process. And again, we were able to understand it better because we had already done some preliminary work ourselves. Then when it came to doing our study, we simply built upon the solid framework that she started. And as I said, I had individuals who have a more statistical background. So we made sure that we got a broad coverage, but a statistically sound figure. But what we did in our report was really try to highlight what those challenges were to start conversations that perhaps needed to be had at a board level. And that obviously that did introduce issues around recognizing that socially, fair policy has an impact. And while we won't necessarily do work on that, we hope that we raised and gave management an opportunity to discuss it. And they are obviously focusing on fair policy these days and are bringing forward reports to that effect. So as far as fare evasion going on, again, I think we prompted a lot of work to be done by management in building a new model, a revenue protection officer model. Resources were dedicated to the fare inspection program and to support them with transit enforcers. So I think a lot of work was really done more by management, which is where, of course, it should be. We just highlight issues and we support to the extent we can. But one thing that did come out of the audit work, and Ron Lalonde, he can speak to it himself, was I think he recognized that by reporting out on it, it keeps attention on it. And so what we were hoping to do was to support management going forward, to do, again, a little check-in work as management was pulling together its own dashboard and would be presenting that on a regular basis. We could do a variety of little things. Certainly not going to do another extensive full Fairy Vision study for some time, because a lot of initiatives, they take time to have an impact. But unfortunately, then COVID kind of happened. I think a lot of things were put on the shelf, which is fine. And it was necessary to shift from fair enforcement to more education focus. So again, as far as the work that we could do once things get up and running, or certainly ridership reaches a certain level, we can go out and do checkpoints. We can, review the data deployment strategy that was pulled together following our work to see if it still makes sense. We can certainly make observations. We also are trying to look at the cameras and what kind of data and information we can gather from that and comparing it to Presto. So it may not necessarily give you a Fairy Vision figure, but it might help support and give trends on tapping behavior, which of course is the precursor to them actually complying. So I hope that answers your question, but I think that right now is COVID still impacting ridership, and we have such a small team that we've just shift focus to other matters until that picks up more.
Yes, well, that's perfectly understandable in the circumstances. I'm just wondering with the, we have seen that we've had a lot of work on enforcement. Obviously, we've, as a board, we've approved incremental headcount. There's work ongoing with fare inspectors and the training, and we've obviously got a couple of agenda items today on this. But I'm wondering if you looked at all at various ways where instead of just enforcement, that we're looking at prevention, so that we, obviously in an ideal world, we don't have to enforce. It's down to a level where this is something that is what you, I guess, would call acceptable, and the use of technology. So I don't know how far your mandate goes, and I'm just curious to see if you did any, I don't know, look into if there would be any impact on employing a tap on and a tap off on Presto, if there's anything like that A, is in the scope, and then B, did you do it? Did you have a look at it?
So definitely, when we did our study and prepared for our presentation, we reached out to a lot of other transit agencies to understand what are they doing, especially with this idea that if we were going to do quote unquote, quickie support along the way, or every quarter, every semi-quarter, whatever it was going to be. And you're right, there's great variety and viewpoints on how they approach enforcement versus free transit, but that's not really ARC's place to make those decisions. Obviously we would support and bring forward information on anything that we're asked to review and do, but I'm not sure if Kirsten or someone from the management team would like to speak to progress being made on that front.
Yeah, I'll just throw in a couple of comments. So the work that that ARC did to help us understand fare evasion was very helpful around the tapping behavior of our customers. And what we found useful on the management side is the insight that they were able to give us through the data analytics on the use of the child card. So we were able to use their data to determine where the child card was being improperly used, or most likely improperly used. So for example, I think some of the childcare data indicated that there was a lot of childcare use after 10 o'clock at night at certain locations. So we were able to go to those stations and do targeted fare checks and fare enforcement in aligning with that data. So we weren't, it wasn't, we didn't want to, we're not blanketing through anecdote, and we're not just going out there and targeting people who, are paying, for example. We're using the data and the insights from ARC through that tapping exercise to understand where our risks lie, and then, move our resources to those risks. And also through the tapping data done by ARC, they also gave us advice on communications in terms of how do we educate people around, paying. And we did we revived or renewed our communications campaign based on some of the advice and some of the insights from that work. So I think we found it very useful, and I think we'll continue to look to ARC to help us with that analysis and some of those targeted, I'll call them audits, targeted audits to help inform our strategies on the management side.
Thanks, that's it for me.
Thanks, Julie. Joanne, any questions?
Just maybe a follow-up question on the data analytics and really to you, Kristen, because as Chris said earlier, if management is going to take advantage and leverage data analytics, it really is dependent on what sort of data has been identified by the different departments that should be collected and how good that exercise is. So maybe you could just give us a bit of a sense of that. And I know it's got Rick's attention and all of you, but perhaps you could just remind us of where that's at.
Yeah, I think the big data around what we just were talking about, fair evasion and revenue and so forth, is obviously the Presto data. And I've seen incredible advancements made around how we're looking at that data and the talent. Chris referenced the talent that she's brought on board in the audit team to look at that data, and it's impressive. They've done a tremendous job also around the safety data, which Chris alluded to. So we have different pockets of data in the organization at different levels of maturity. And I think we all understand that this is, this evidence-based, data-driven analysis is what we need to inform our strategies and certainly how we're operating daily. So there's operating data, that goes to our on-time performance and some of the things that inform the CEO report. There's the Presto data, which is, is tremendous. Valuable information, and ARC and others are using that to inform, financial reporting, the budget, what we're doing around COVID, et cetera. So those are just sort of general comments, Commissioner, if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, really just the point here is that the extent to which the approach that the internal audit is taking to be a partner to provide advice is really critically dependent on the extent to which the management team uses it and the sorts of questions it puts on the table, the kinds of information it's collecting. So I think what Ron, from our perspective, what we want to be able to confirm is that there's a real there's a positive link between these two parts of the organization, and they're working well together, and that's certainly the sense I'm getting. So all good. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne. Chris, I had one question about your work for next year on the Executive Compliance Certificate. And where I'm going with this is to make sure that I understand the separation of duties between audit and management. And if you can just talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing in that context. I just want to ensure that you're not actually doing the certification for management, that because we want them to be certifying their compliance. So if you can explain, how the work you're doing supports that without crossing that line, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. So basically that initiative, the history, it came out of the education session that we gave to this group a number of years ago, and it was to basically support the RMC in the fulfillment of its oversight duties. And in so doing, it was to acknowledge and I think give a transparent way of recognizing that management has always been accountable and responsible for complying with key legislation. So that's nothing new. But I think what ARC did was facilitate and bring a tool that would help document that and demonstrate that to the RMC, and in a sense protect you in that, in a visible way, the chiefs were declaring that, yes, we are aware of the legislation. Yes, we are in compliance to it. And if we are aware of incidents of non-compliance, that we have reported it. So I think that the lion's share of our work on the certificate has been done in terms of benchmarking and reviewing and selling the idea. Obviously, once we got legal sort of on board with it, we've leveraged or partnered with them, and these education sessions that are really simply hosted by ARC, but they're being delivered by our legal staff. Was recognizing that asking anybody to sign something, even though it's nothing new to them, it can create a discomfort. So we want to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to be more comfortable with the legislation, to have an opportunity to ask questions, understand the downside risks, the upside risks, how does this impact me? And so really it was just facilitating, bringing together that group. And quite honestly, other than giving the intro to these education sessions, I really just now sit back and I listen to what are the pain points or the questions that management's raising, because I look at that as simply being then an opportunity for the areas that maybe we need to go do some work in more an audit lens, or at least an advisory lens to give support to compliance. And when I say compliance mapping, this now really is the domain that I'm taking back for that audit lens, is that using those 15 pieces of legislation that are highlighted on the certificate, I'm now going back and basically asking the questions, where are the activities happening in the TTC that are meeting those legislative requirements? And as a starting point, you use safety as an example, the OSHA. We have lots of safety programs that are being put in place to help drive and support compliance. So I want to start by reviewing those programs to make sure that they are driving compliance. And then we can go to frontline management to say, all right, where are there still gaps? And where else can we put processes and controls to support it? So I see the line as being, we facilitated this. We got it to the point where the certificate has been drafted. We will certainly be pushing for the signatures to be made and bring that to the ARMC, obviously with a covering memo from Rick. But it's now what I would call the assurance work and the mapping and helping to drive the work that we can do to give management more comfort, and the ARMC, obviously, the assurance that we are complying with the legislation. So I hope that distinction is clear.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Okay, if there are no other questions for Chris on this item, I think we can probably ask for a motion to adopt the recommendations in the report, which is to approve the plan and to forward it to the board for its information. Julie, could I ask you to make that motion?
So moved.
Joanne, will you second?
I second.
Okay, and we're approved on that item. And given that there's no other business for the audit committee at today's meeting, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn, and maybe Joanne, it's your turn for that.
Okay, I motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Okay, and Julie, you'll second that?
I will second that motion. Thank you.
Okay, we're approved and we're adjourned. And sorry, just before we go, Chris-Anne, is it the same call-in details for the full board meeting at 10 o'clock?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. Committee members, we'll see you at 10 o'clock, or we'll hear you at 10 o'clock. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Rob. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris-Anne, do we leave?
Thank you.
So can we leave our connection live and then just turn off the mic and the camera?
Yes, that's no problem.